just say, so I'm Brad Heinrichs. I'm an actuary with Foster & Foster. How many of you have heard of an actuary? What it is? It's not a place where they bury dead actors. It's actually a person. In any event, so I think my purpose today is twofold. First, I'm supposed to go over this modeler that we created. And we'll get to that in a second. The second thing I think is my job is to get you back on time. I think I'm the only thing that's keeping you between from the cafeteria and lunch. So I'll try to do what I can to keep my comments brief. Before I get into this modeler, just kind of dovetailing on what these gentlemen have mentioned, our firm has been working for PSPRS for the last 4 or so years. And our firm works predominantly in the public sector. Our bailiwick is public retirement systems, and we work for about 1,000 or so public pension funds across the country. I can tell you and volunteer this information to tell you that of our 1,000 plus clients across the country, the board and the staff that you have here at PSPRS, I don't mind telling you, are among the best of any of our clients. From the concept of just how impressive these people are individually on the board, the staff has always, there aren't any, I've not run into anybody on the staff that I haven't had a pleasure working with. You guys are in very, very good hands. One of the things that one of the first initiatives that I had whenever I got on the board and listening to some of the comments, I think maybe coming from you, as the board said that our stakeholders, when they get the actuarial valuation, a lot of times it's a surprise, and they don't know. It's almost like they're afraid of it. They're worried what it's going to be. They have no idea. It's like this black box that the actuary shakes, and then whatever comes out, this is what I have to contribute. And it's this. There's anxiety and maybe even fear to some level when it came to understanding what their annual contribution requirements are going to be. And so, in talking with the board, I said, well, one of the things that we've done for other clients that they've enjoyed is putting together a modeler that will help, from a budgetary standpoint, help the stakeholders really get an idea of what will happen if. And so that's what I'm going to go over today, is really just kind of walking you through this modeler, what the concept is, and answer whatever questions you have. Are there any questions before I get started? No? How many of you have actually heard of this modeling tool? Yeah? Okay. Now, how many have actually used this modeling tool? Hey, all right. At least a few of you anyway. Well, I guess I'll start by saying Christian has it. Do you have it on the website? Do you email it to them, or how actually do they get it?
We send out an invite link.
Okay.
And so it's somewhat of a two-step process.
Okay.
And then everybody who registers to receive it will receive the modeler with the user.
If you don't have access, maybe contact Christian. Don't contact me, or contact Clark. Clark, I just heard him volunteer that he was going to take any and all questions with regards to anything. So, in any event. So, the first part of here's the concept. The concept is we want you to be able to predict what will happen to your funding requirements as you move forward. We want you to know what happens if we have either a run-up or a downturn in the market. We want you to know what if the board decides to lower their assumed rate of return like they did in the last year. They moved from 7.3 to 7.2. They've been discussing going to 7.0. We want you to be able to say, well, what would happen to us? What would happen to our funding requirements if they moved from 7.2 to 7.0 or some other number, 7.1? We want you to know that this modeling tool will help you to understand what if we make an extra contribution? What if we say, okay, our unfunded liability is this? What if we threw an extra million at it, or $5 million at it, or whatever number, okay? This modeling tool will help you understand what that will do to your funding requirements. It'll help you to understand what will happen to your unfunded liability, all of those things. And so, so what I'm going to do quickly, I think, is to really just show you how it works, okay? So, for whatever reason, I've got it set to Tempe Fire. We have Tempe representatives in the room? No? Okay, so we can pick on Tempe. Not that there's really anything to pick on. I just, for whatever reason, it was set on Tempe. So one of the things you can do, you can change. And this side here is where you do your inputs. But you can pick whatever employer you are, okay? And then you can decide how long you want to do projections. I've got it set to 2052. We could make it shorter. We could make it, I don't know if you want to make it much longer than 30 years. But, you know, so pick your time period. Then the next thing you have to decide is, do we want our population to be level, or do we want it to be something that varies? When I say level, I mean I'm talking about the active members. So let's say you've got 200 active members. Now there are going to be people throughout the year that terminate. There are going to be people that retire, okay? What do we want the active workforce to look like? When someone terminates, are we going to hire somebody else? When somebody retires, are we going to hire somebody else? That's what this is saying. And so the default is just to keep things level. You could say, well, I want to have no new hires. We're just going to keep things, when someone retires, we're not rehiring them. The other thing we could do is we could go to a schedule where we could then decide. I guess the Tempe Fire Department isn't a huge one. This is basically saying, all right, when people leave, expecting, say, 10 people to leave, do we want to have 10 new entrants come in, like in 2023 when those 10 people are expected to leave? Or do we want more people, say 15 or fewer, okay? That's where you can make those changes in this, where the green is. The green, I think that's green. I'm colorblind, so I'm hoping that's green. Is that kind of green? Sort of green? Okay. The greenish, that's where you actually input items, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and make this go back to level. Now, the next section is where it asks you what sort of assumed rate of return we want to assume, okay? And what are we talking about here? So with PSPRS, there are benefit promises, right? The pension is the promise, okay? And so we make all of these promises to all of the active members and the retirees, and we have to pay for all those benefits for as long as they live. We have an asset pool, which is, what's our latest number, Harry? Are we
19 billion.
19 billion. We've got 19 billion bucks, okay, that we are going to use to pay for all those benefits, along with future contributions, okay? But what my job is as the actuary is to create a model that basically says this: let's project all of the future benefits that we expect to be paid out of the plan for all the retirees and all of the active members. So I have to make assumptions like how much money people are going to make when they retire. Are they going to quit during the year? When are they going to retire? Are they going to become disabled? How long are they going to live? Okay? Let me smile. Okay. I'm not used to having my picture taken. In any event, so we have to make all of these assumptions, and then we also have to make the assumption of what kind of return are we going to get on our assets to pay for all these benefits. That helps us determine how much money we need to supplement to the asset pool each year, so that when the last member of this plan dies, we have just enough money to pay for their pension check, okay? That's really kind of the model that we're creating as actuaries, all right? So a very, very important model, or very important assumption, is the assumed rate of return. What kind of return are we going to get? So if you just think about this logistically, if I assume that I'm going to make less money, okay, we were assuming 7.3. Now if we assume that we're going to earn 7.2, well, that didn't change the benefits, right? What then has to happen if we're going to assume that we're going to be making less? That means we have to contribute more, right, into the fund, okay? And so we go through quite a process to determine what our assumed rate of return is. And by the way, your 7.2 is very close to the national average. So you guys are not, you're not way above, you're not way below, you're kind of in sort of the mainstream. So on this in this table, in the green area, you have the opportunity to change it, to say, okay, I think the board might do this next year. So let's say I want to change the assumed rate to 7.0. Okay? And you hit that, you type 7.0 in there, and then you can move over and show what you can see what that does to your funding requirements. In this table, it groups the numbers by years. It includes the tier 3. But also, this is the total. So you can see that all in, if we assumed 7.0 versus 7.2, we would be having to contribute an extra $13.9 million, almost $14 million for the Tempe Fire. I think it was Tempe Fire, for the Tempe Fire plan. Okay, that's when I say we, I mean the sponsor would have to contribute an extra almost $14 million over, up through 2052 in order to keep their plan sound, okay, using a lower assumed rate of return. And then if you go to the table, you go to the next slide, or the next worksheet there, and this is really small. I'll try to make this bigger as well. What you can see here is that we show side by side if we don't make a change versus if we do. So here it shows the current, and then the alternate shows, so the current interest rate 7.2, the alternate 7.0. And so then what you can then see are by year up through 2052 what the estimated unfunded liabilities are, what the actual the components of the funding requirements, all of the information that you can imagine or want, you can find here on this table, okay? And that's all emanating from this one change that we made to our inputs on the graph and input section, all right? Are there any questions about that? You understand why you would want to do that? Hey, I want to know what might happen to us if the board lowers their assumed rate of return, okay? So I'm going to put it back just for grins. Another question that you might have is, and I get this a lot with some of my clients, and usually it's not my clients, it's council members or other stakeholders that really don't know a lot about pensions, but they think they do. And what they'll say is, they'll make comments like, 7.2, you guys are crazy. There's no way you're going to earn 7.2. You're out of your league. There's no way you can do it. And then you could say, well, I can show you how we've done in the past, where we've earned 7.2. But then I can also show you why we think we're going to earn 7.2 in the future. And some of those people at that time will say, okay, all right, fine. Most of them will say, nah, you still don't know what you're talking about. And so for those people, or just people that just want to know what the risk is, okay, you may want to know, well, what if we don't earn 7.2? What if we earn something less, right? I mean, that's a fair question, all right? So we answer that question as well. And so what you can do here is to say, the board is assuming 7.2. What are we going to earn, okay? And one of the options is, well, we're going to earn 7.2, All right? We've got a few other options. Well, what if we earn 6.5 instead, or 5.5? Say we earn 5.5 instead of 7.2. Well, if we earn 5.5, what happens? Well, we thought we were going to earn 7.2. We earned 5.5. We call those investment losses. For us in the pension system, our bogey or our even is 7.2, right? Personally, if my even is 0, I set my bar lower. If I earn 3%, I made money, right? But from the pension standpoint, we're expecting to earn 7.2. If we don't earn 7.2, we will have an actuarial loss, okay? What happens? We take that loss, we have to make up for it in contributions, okay? But we don't make up for it all at once. We spread it out over time, all right? And so what we can show here is the what ifs. What happens if we earn 5.5% instead of 7.2? All right? You can go over here. You can look at it graphically in a slide, or you can, or in this graph, you can see how funding requirements grow. Okay? So the red, I think that's red, brown, red, whatever it is. The alternate is what we change it to, the 5.5. In this case, if we only earn 5.5, our funding requirements continue to grow for Tempe Fire. Versus if we were to earn our 7.2, they grow a little bit and then they start to really trail off fast. Okay? So you see if we're not meeting our assumptions, things can get pretty ugly. You can then summarize, you can go to the summary tables over on the right, or go to the actual exact information or the more detailed information in table 1 on the other worksheet. But you can then see how if we earn 5.5 instead of 7.2 over the course of the next 30 years, they'll have to contribute an extra $151 million. Pretty substantial. That just shows you the power of how important that assumption is. It also illustrates how important of a job these board members have. And they take it extremely seriously. That's why they have investment committees. That's why they spend all of this time, effort, and money to study this and make sure that the investments are appropriate and that they maximize returns while at the same time minimizing some risk. Okay? Are there any questions about that concept and what I did to do that what if? Now, I wanted to show you also, let's say you don't know whether it's going to be 5.5. Let's just say you want to say, well, I don't know, maybe it's 7.2 for most years, but I've got a bad feeling about this year or next year. So we made it so that you could, if you've got one of those crystal balls that works, right? If you've got one of those crystal balls that works, you could then go down here, do input schedule, and you could say in any given year what you think the return is, what you want it to be. So you can model it out. So if you think that in 2024 we're gonna lose 17%, you could just type that in there, and then you can then see what that does to your funding requirements, what it does to your unfunded liability. All right? Does everybody kind of see how this works? Pretty user-friendly. All right? Any questions about this? All right. By the way, you know one other real good indicator as to how good this board is and their staff? They put the actuary before lunch, not after lunch. So anyway, just a thought. But you know, nothing gets by these people. They know what to do. So there's other approaches here. One of the items that the board tackled was this concept of negative amortization. And negative amortization exists when the payment that's being made to the pension fund is less than the interest on the debt. So if you think about having an interest-only mortgage, they have these in Arizona. I'm from Florida. We've got them there too. Okay, imagine if you've got an interest-only mortgage and you are, and your payment that you make is less than that interest-only payment, all right? What then happens to what you owe on your house? It goes up, right? Because you didn't pay any, not only did you not pay any principal, you didn't pay all the interest. So it starts to gobble you up, right? It's kind of the same concept with credit cards. Well, in your fund, one of the items that I brought to their attention that the board acted upon was to try to eliminate that. And the way you eliminate that is to make your payments more level. They're not, the way they were being made is that they were starting really low, and then they were increasing by 3.5% a year. I can't remember the exact number, but basically payments in the first year really low, and then over time they just grow and grow and grow in accordance with what's called a payroll growth rate. All right? And so the board said, we need to take that payroll growth rate down. But we don't want to make our stakeholders choke on the funding requirements, because this wasn't something they were planning on. So they decided to walk it down over time. And so if you were wanting to see what the impact would be if you made bigger unfunded liability payments, you could lower your payroll growth rate here and see what that does to your unfunded liability and show how it pays it off faster. That's one that's a little bit more technical, may not be something you want to mess with. But the bigger one that I think is more important is, what if we contribute more money? I've read several articles over the last 12 months praising PSPRS, not just by you guys, that you guys write your own. I see it in national pension publications. You guys may not read those. I read those. It's fun stuff for an actuary. But one of the reasons why that you guys have garnered so much positive attention is because your funded status has been growing faster than everybody else's. Why has it grown faster? One, you've done well in the markets, but what's really helped are extra contributions, pension obligation bonds, or just pure and simple, I think we're going to contribute more. And hopefully it's because they looked at our modeling tool and said, wow, this really helps us. We should do this. And so if you're wanting to ask yourself the question, what if, I'm going to put this back to what it was before, what if we contributed more money? So we say, yes. Pretty simple, okay? And then they say, okay, well, now you want to know when. So anytime in the next 30 years, you could say, I'm going to contribute an extra however much, okay? Say I'm going to contribute an extra $5,000 in the second quarter. I can even pick which quarter. I mean, come on. This is precision at its finest here. I want to contribute an extra $5 million. These are in thousands. What does that do to my future funding requirements? So if you do that, if you go over here, you can look at your graphs. Okay. And then you can say, oh, how much extra money did I actually contribute over time? All right. And so you can then see how these extra contributions help. Okay. And maybe it's even easier looking at, thank you. It's even easier looking at the other table. You see that your unfunded liability drops. I contribute the extra $5 million. It was $13.7 million here, and it fell to $8.5 million there. You can see how that drops your unfunded liability. You can see how that makes your future contributions lower. I think one of the big problems that I heard you guys say when I first came on was, I don't think I want to write an extra check to the fund because it feels like a black hole. I don't know what's going to happen to it. Well, here you can see, plain as day, what will happen to your extra contribution. Okay? Are there any questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Hannah from City of Tucson.
Hi.
And one of the things that's been difficult to try to get an idea of the impact of is just the significant wage escalation that has happened over the course of the last 2 years, keeping up with the labor market, right? And so, for instance, I think, hello? I think that for our police officers, for instance, base wages have increased roughly around 30% in the last 24 months.
Yeah.
So is this model able to help us with projections regarding that issue?
Currently, it's not set up for that, but we could create that. That's something that we could add to it. That's a really good suggestion. I think what she's referring to is this. If one of our assumptions when we're creating our model to determine what these pension benefits are going to be for all these police officers and firefighters is what kind of pay increases they're going to get. And if I'm assuming that they're going to get a 6% pay increase and they get 12, well, then we have what's called an actuarial loss in the next actuarial valuation. Oh, we thought that their salary was only going to be 6% higher. It's now 12% higher. Oh, no, we're not going to be having to fund for a bigger pension benefit. So that means what? Costs have to go up, okay? I think that's actually and by the way, this wasn't something when we created this that was much of an issue. It was prior to the inflation that we're seeing now. And interestingly enough, one of the tabs here is debt financing. I was just talking to some of the folks before the meeting, before this talk, and said, it seems like a year ago people were looking at pension obligation bonds. Well, interest rates are now, out of sight for something like that for most people. So I think that's a good idea, and that could be something that we could incorporate. I'm not opposed to it. I can see how it would work. What we would do is we would show, okay, your current salary scale, what we're expecting, and then we could have you say, well, no, it's not 6, it's 12. Or, oh, it's, or you said 30 or 20 or I can't remember what exact number.
It wouldn't work just to touch your payroll growth factor there.
No, the payroll growth factor there is more about the total payroll of the department. It's not on an individual basis. And I think that's what you're referring to is on an individual basis what will happen. And that's something we could tackle. I'm not opposed to. I think it's a good idea.
Brad?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit because there are a few things that we could potentially help you with there. The modeler kind of sort of could do a little bit of that. If you're talking about an overall payroll of like 10% across the board, that's probably a little bit easier to model with the modeler a little bit, and you can do things, especially with some of the tools. But we can also look at your actuarial valuation and what your payroll base is in the actuarial valuation versus what you're projecting your payroll base to be. And we could do some things with you to help with that.
Yeah, we've been trying to keep track of it, but those valuations just lag. And we know that we've made these wage changes go forward. We know that they're significantly different from what we've done in the past. And so it's like, gosh, how can we get our arms around what the knock-on effect is?
It's a really good comment. Thank you. Yes, in the back.
If you were to add that salary scale component, would you contemplate setting it up so it would have a schedule like you did the alternate rates? Because if we're in a temporary 3 or 4 year run of inflation, and you're saying we're inflating salaries by 10%, but at some point we would regress back to what your long-term salary scale is. I would think if you just put the salary scale in, then you're contemplating 30 years at 10%.
We could look at doing something like that. Unfortunately, we don't just pick a particular number. We don't just say salaries are all going to grow by 6% or by 5%. It's usually based upon different service levels. Like the people that are just hired, that are younger, tend to get higher wage increases than those that have been working for 20 years. So it might get a little bit thorny to do something like that, but I'll think about it. We may be able to do something.
Just because we know that inflation won't be here forever.
Understood. Yep. It may be something where we have a temporary wage inflation increase. That might do it, where it basically just adds a layer. Anybody else? I know Christian probably wants me to exit here. Yeah.
Do you have an estimated date of when the modelers are gonna come out?
Well, Christian, do you have, I thought
They're getting close.
okay. I think we have completed our first pass at, I think the PSPRS and the EORP modelers. Corp, I think, should be coming soon.
Right.
So, I would anticipate it being very soon, very, very soon.
Stay tuned. And probably one comment on the modelers, and this is in the actuarial world in general. There are so many estimates, so many assumptions, and how many of you, when you did your budgets this year, predicted exactly what your spend was going to be? That's just one assumption, right? So there are assumptions on top of assumptions, and these are meant to be directionally correct over a long period of time. So it's hard to get a tool that is built around that assumption to be able to say, well, I want to predict what my payroll contribution rate is going to be 2 years from now.
But I can understand your point where you're sitting there kind of going, well, we just gave these big pay increases. There's going to be a pension impact. Can I get an idea what that pension impact might look like? Not really holding it. Is it going to go up by $1 million? Is it going to go up by $500,000? Is it going to go by $5 million? I would imagine if I was in your shoes, I'd want to have at least a concept of what might occur. Anybody else? Let's eat.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.